Hello and welcome to this month's Downtown Aviation and Redevelopment Subcommittee. I'm Daniel Valenzuela, I'm District 5 Council Member, and I'm honored to chair this subcommittee. Honored to be here with my colleagues, Councilwoman Kate Gallego, Councilman Bill Gates, and Councilwoman Thelda Williams. Welcome everyone. As we begin every meeting that uh, that we have here that I'm honored to chair, we start and we end with the call to the public. We want to just make sure that the public realizes that they get the first and the last word. So with that, no cards at the beginning. We do have several speakers throughout the meeting as well. So going on to item 3, approval of September 3rd minutes. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
A motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Motion carries. Item 4, approval to award THAB funds for fiscal year 14-15. And that is on the consent. Actually, let's see here.
5 and
Two.
6.
Okay, 4, 5, and 6 are on the consent. I'll entertain a motion unless someone wants to separate it out.
Move approval?
Second.
So the approval for 4, 5, and 6 on the consent. And the second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Item 7,
Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee, we're here today to talk about a project in the warehouse district, bringing new residential into downtown and some exciting investments. So here today with us is Chris Mackey, Scott Sumners, Michelle Dodds to help explain the details of staff's recommendation.
Great. Thank you, Paul. Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee, we're here today to talk about Ballpark Lofts, a proposed development agreement. This is a proposed development in the warehouse character area south of downtown Phoenix. So just as part of background, our proposer, our developer that has come to us with a proposal is For Property Group, and we have a representative from For here today. Jonathan Cornelius is here. Jonathan, just want to wave. Thanks for coming. This proposal was submitted quite some time ago and has been out in the community for several meetings and discussing the historic preservation and the community aspects of the proposal. We had an evaluation panel take a look at the proposal, and it included both community members and city staff, and the representatives are listed here on the screen. The site is approximately 3.4 acres in the southern part of downtown near the ballpark. Just adjacent to the railroad tracks. And the proposal is for residential, multifamily development. A lot of interest in residential development in downtown at this time. This is a very challenging site, a lot of buildings on the site, and the developer will incur some significant costs to protect and preserve some of the historic buildings that are actually designated as landmarks on the site. The total investment estimated is $43 million. And there's additional amenities for the residents that are proposed on site. This is structured parking involved in the project, not any surface parking involved at all. But probably the most prominent aspect of this is historic preservation. So here to walk through just a few slides is Michelle Dodds.
Thank you, Scott. Chairman, members of the subcommittee, back in 2009, the Jackson Street PUD zoning case was approved by City Council. There were actually 4 historic buildings on the site, or 6 actually. 2 were already designated historic, but as part of the negotiation, they were upgraded to landmark status, adding greater protection for those historic properties. One top photo is Gerardo's building, built in 1928, and the bottom one is the RV Sue's grocery store, which was built in 1901. And the Gerardo building was a cafe on the first floor and rental units on the second floor, both very important to the Hispanic community. In 2013, the design review process with our office was conducted, and they do have a certificate of appropriateness for rehabilitation of those two historic buildings. The preservation community, led by Jennifer Bochek with Preserve Phoenix, met with the property owner trying to get additional protections for preservation. And what you see here is a list of what they were able to do, which is one, preserve, rehabilitate, and activate the two landmark buildings, but also to install some interpretive markers, visible to the public in front of those buildings, talking about the history, the importance of those two buildings. And then there is an additional building which is just north of this site on the south side of the railroad tracks. It's the Pioneer Fruit Company warehouse, which is existing. However, it is not designated, and that building will be demolished. And so part of the negotiation was to remove the trusses from that warehouse building and integrate it into the new construction in hopefully a visible place. And then any other historic features on the site that can be salvaged, such as the stamps in the sidewalk, with the old dates of when the sidewalks were poured, and other things that can be salvaged as time goes on. And we do have representatives from the preservation community here today that met with the developer. We have Donna Reiner and Steve Dreisenson are here in the event you have questions. And so with that, unless you have questions, I'll turn it back over to Scott.
Thank you. Very quickly, just the outreach that we've done in terms of this project, and the developer has been very, very engaged with the community, has been extensive over the summer and actually before the summer as well. We actually have a letter from Preserve Phoenix that we'll go ahead and distribute here, commenting on their suggestions for this development agreement, and they've been very informative and helpful, and a lot of their recommendations were actually integrated into the terms that are presented here today. So thank you very much to that group. And then we also, sorry, that one's not quite for this. Let's see, the business terms very quickly. The developer is going to finance and construct the project at their cost, approximately $43 million. Historic preservation, all of the elements here are directly from this letter that you have in front of you. In terms of timeline, the developer would like to get started pretty quickly here with the schedule ending up with an opening in roughly late 2016 or early 2017. The assistance that developer's requesting is a 20-year government property lease excise tax lease or agreement, including 8 years of property tax abatement. And as part of that, the developer makes annual lease payments to the city of about $2.65 million. There are other standard terms and conditions that apply there too. Benefits of this project, prominently and foremost, historic preservation. What's not up here is this helps a relatively small developer. We've helped larger developers in some recent times, and this helps one of the smaller developers deliver a product to downtown. About 360 new downtown residents, extensive construction sales tax revenues, and long-term sales tax revenues as well. It's consistent with the goals of the City Council adopted downtown strategic plan, and it could be a catalyst for future development in the warehouse. This is, once again, a very challenging site. From an economic standpoint, roughly the one-time city tax revenues and the annual city tax revenues and then rent, all of that, in a nutshell, is on the order of about $7 million over a term of 20 years. And the value of the government property lease excise to the developer, based on some estimates that we've done, is a little north of $6 million. So the benefits to the city are about $7 million, and the value to the developer is right around $6 million. So this makes sense from a financial standpoint for us. And with that, we are happy to take questions if you have them, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. If my colleagues don't mind, we'll go right to the cards here. We have several cards marked in favor. Start with Dave Kreider, DPI. Mr. Kreider.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, member of the subcommittee. I think on this project would like to just make one point. I think that we have done an excellent job over many years of defining our downtown by building large, complicated projects, convention centers, arenas, and stadiums, and I think they really help stabilize the downtown community at a time when downtowns all over the United States were in decline. And we started to push our community in the right direction. Now we're getting an incredible opportunity to build neighborhood and community within the downtown area and really providing kind of the connectivity and the fabric to make this the kind of vibrant, exciting place that we want it to be. Having places for people to live is really important, and having these small and medium-sized developers now come in and begin to fill that gap is important. So we very much support this initiative. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Crutter. Donna Rayner? And I don't have marked in favor or opposed. I'll let you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the subcommittee. It's one of those things where, as a private citizen and one who is also concerned about what our city looks like, our heritage, which I know that you all are interested in, and I was really appreciative that the developers sought us out and asked us questions, took that input and everything. My only concern is, what happens if they don't? What recourse do we as citizens and we as the city who would be giving them money, what recourse do we have if they don't live up to the obligation? Otherwise, I am in favor of it, except they could reduce the parking. I'm tired of having parking garages downtown.
Sure, Mr. Chairman, subcommittee members, the recourse the city would have is to revoke the terms of the lease, which would take the entire financial benefit of this proposition away. And I see Jonathan nervously nodding his head. Yes, that's true. So there are teeth in this agreement, yes.
Okay, good. Brian Cassidy, marked in favor.
Yeah, I'm Brian Cassidy, president of CCBG Architects. We're located 2 blocks west of this site on Buchanan and First Street, and we own and developed our own building. I'm here in support of their application. There's just a couple of reasons I think that are really important that are going on. And I also represent one of the representatives of a newly formed warehouse district. There's about a dozen main property owners and tenants that are coming together just in this last year, starting to get some momentum. Unfortunately, we don't have a logo or an official name, but I think by the end of the year we will here. But we're all in together in this to make this a much better area. Just a couple highlights about this project that I think are good. For one, obviously 2 nice historic buildings, but it also will convert a surface parking lot into a very nice urban housing project at 4 stories plus, and the scale, it's appropriate for this neighborhood. The parking count, obviously from a developer's perspective, you have to have sufficient parking to be successful right now in our downtown, and I believe their parking count is appropriate for what they're doing here. They also have a rare opportunity that doesn't happen much downtown, and that's when a developer gets to design both sides of a street. So they literally will control 1 full block of Buchanan, both the north and south side. As an architect, I'm not their architect, but I strongly support the design to date, the planning effort that they're putting in, and it's a very challenging site. And our concern is if they can't make this project happen, I don't know that anybody could for quite a long time here, and they have the only known real housing proposal we're aware of in the entire warehouse district right now. So from that perspective, we strongly support the project and recommend you do also, and the GPLET request. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Vince Garano.
Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee, my name is Vince Scarano, Built Form Architecture. I am the architect for Ballpark Apartments, and I got to say, as a project, this is remarkably refreshing. We've been here forever, and usually we end up designing things that are on green fields, meaning virgin desert. So how remarkable is it to have the opportunity to build something urban? And we're not talking mock urban, we're talking about something that is in the original city of Phoenix. And just tracing the history of this, as many of you are aware that there's certain requirements that have to occur when you go through and you develop a project, looking at the phase 1, looking at the history of the site. The remarkable history of the site even goes beyond what we're preserving here, and I think it's our intent to represent that in the design. So obviously, I'm in support of the project. Thank you.
Thank you. Jonathan Cornelius.
Thank you. I'm obviously the developer, so I'm in favor of the project. I've been a big fan of the warehouse district for a considerable amount of time, probably since going back to 2005 when the entertainment district was planned, but then unfortunately fell apart. I think just given the location and proximity to downtown, this area just needs some connectivity. We're hoping this project can act as a catalyst and help spur further development in the warehouse district. You know, 2 blocks away from Jefferson, 3 blocks away from Washington, you've light rail, you've got the ball fields. It's just, I just think it's a really great area, and it just needs a little bit of a catalyst to jumpstart the entire area.
Thank you, sir. Billy Shields, marked in favor.
Mr. Chairman, members, Billy Shields, 7201 North Central, investment partner in HH Lures and Lures CM, the owners of the Lures block. We are also, Raj Hanji, the principal partner, and I are also members of and supportive of the Warehouse District Group in formation. This really is a key piece of what's happening downtown and in the Warehouse District. What we view the Lures block as sort of the gateway and a connection between downtown Phoenix and the Warehouse District that's never existed. With businesses that are popping up there, residents coming, it really is the missing piece for downtown. And I'm just saying the elephant in most rooms these days are, GIPLET. The city has very few tools to help with development anymore, and the way that I have described it to people is, if I don't live in a historic district, but some people do, and they get a historic tax credit. You could say that I'm paying for that, right, through my property taxes, but there's a value to me. I don't personally ride the light rail almost ever to Suns games, but I pay for it, and I think it's a great amenity, and it's a great economic benefit for Phoenix. The ASU downtown campus, City of Phoenix has $200 million of bond money that I'm paying for out of my property tax rate. I've never taken a class there, but I think it's a great thing for downtown. The missing piece, we've got billions of dollars invested, convention centers and light rails, and now businesses are coming, more businesses are coming, organic businesses are popping up. The missing piece, everybody would agree, is residents. And I can speak firsthand, the infill cost of developing downtown is eye-popping as opposed to West Phoenix or North Phoenix or South Phoenix. For the new Lures Hotel alone, just the electric, when we first met with APS, they said it could cost you somewhere between $3 million and $10 million to get electricity to your building. It's a $70 million building. If that were a house, it would cost you $30,000 for a $200,000 house to get electricity to your house. So, the streets, the traffic, everything is more expensive downtown. And so, again, we have to incent this. We need the residents, and the economic sales tax of Phoenix over the last 6 years would show that what you're doing is working. And I really encourage you to do what you can to get more residents downtown.
Thank you, sir. We have 3 cards, 2 that are marked in favor, available to speak if requested. David Roderick, Downtown Phoenix Partnership. Steve Drysensen. Okay, sorry. Your handwriting is like my handwriting. And available to speak if requested, Brad Jennings. And I don't see marked in favor or opposed. In favor. Okay. Thank you, sir. So, unless the 3 that I just, would you like to speak, sir? Yes. Okay.
Thank you. My name is Steve Drysis, and I live at 1125 West Culver. I'm a 40-year resident of the Story Historic District. I'm also here on another matter on your agenda. Chairman and members of the subcommittee, I am in support of the Ballpark Lofts process. I think it'll be a very good development for our downtown. I've attended a number of meetings with the developer, and I think it's improved tremendously from day one. And we have a lot of things, I think, to be appreciative of with this development. That said, I'm also a longtime resident of Phoenix, a native, and I lament the loss of historic fabric whenever we lose it. We are saving 2 great buildings on this site, but we're losing a warehouse. We have very little warehouses left. As the gentleman who talked about the organization of the warehouse community in the district, we've got to preserve everything possible. We appreciate a new hotel is coming downtown, but as we speak, we're losing more historic fabric in our downtown, the Lure Central building, as you all know. So while I think this is a wonderful development, we really, really have to find a way to continue to incentivize preserving the fabric that we have left, or we'll have nothing left. So I'm here in support of this project, but I also want us to be mindful of the losses that we continue to sustain and to figure out a way that we can preserve what we still have. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Would you like to speak, sir?
Thank you. So Brad Janang, I'm the president and CTO of WebPT. So we're a high growth company downtown. We employ 250 employees. We plan to hire another 150 over the next year to 2 years. We've also managed to recruit a tech co-working space, which will bring about another 100 to 150 high-tech companies into the downtown warehouse district. Several of my employees want to live very close to downtown, so this project makes sense in there. And we're a big fan of the historic warehouses. In fact, the building that we're going to be moving into is a 123,000 square foot grocery store warehouse that we're doing an adaptive reuse project on. And I think the point that I just want to make is that I think it's great that we're restoring the buildings. I think that bringing residential into the warehouse district is absolutely necessary. Right now it's full of parking lots and barbed wire, and I think that getting people down there and walking down the streets will greatly improve that area. And I think that you can go about historic preservation purposefully. And if you go in there with an intent to preserve and protect what we have, but also make way for new development and the redevelopment that area, I think is kind of the right approach. So I'm in favor.
Thank you, sir. Okay, David Roderick, would you? We're in favor, okay. All right, I'll open it up to my colleagues.
Wonderful.
Councilwoman, there you go.
Want to thank everyone involved for a very extensive process. This project has evolved a lot in response to community concerns, and so thank you for your investment in a good dialogue. We appreciate you working with the school district and getting their support. The rail area is an important stakeholder in the downtown, and as the councilwoman in the area, when I go and visit another residential property in the area, we spend a lot of time talking about rail noise, so I appreciate you in taking the rail into consideration in the design and reaching out to them. I think we've improved a lot on past processes in downtown, and we'll have a better outcome. The warehouse district is a very exciting place now. Congratulations to Brad on his skyrocketing growth and your future endeavors. We are working on the barbed wire and the surface parking lots, and this will be a step in the right direction. And I think there are other warehouse districts in the country that have some of the vibrancy and live work that we're moving towards here today that will only encourage our younger entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs of all ages to stay downtown, to interact with each other, and to kind of create the local organic growth that we want to see in the Phoenix economy. So a positive step in this way. We'll also work with some of the streets improvements we're doing in the area to try to improve connectivity between downtown, and it will be more walkable between the properties in the warehouse district and downtown, just feeding into the work we're doing with the Warehouse District Business Association to try to really make that area more accessible and more well-known for people. It is a gem of our community, but not well-known to everyone, and this will be a positive step forward. So thank you for all the work that got here today. It's a very different design than when it started, but I think a much stronger project, so I'm supportive.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilman Gates?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Love what's going on in downtown, very supportive of it. I thank all the people in this room who have been a part of that, and proud to talk about it in the community. I guess our job here today is to decide whether the GPLET treatment is appropriate. And to me, this is a little different than what I've seen before. I have been supportive of other projects, so I want to just ask some questions. Because the real question is it necessary? Do we have to do it? And so my first question is, the summit is directly north of this, is that right?
Right. Yeah.
Okay. And does anyone know what the occupancy is on the summit right now? Okay. That would be, to me, that's a relevant consideration. I mean, that's a significant, is that multifamily or is that a condo?
It's condo, it's ownership.
Okay.
Yep, so it's a little bit different.
Okay, I'd be interested in that as we move forward with this. This project is 276 units. How many units is the Central Station project that we just approved?
Up to 475 units.
Okay. Have we done GPLITs on other multifamily in downtown, other than Central Station? And if so, which ones, and what were the units, size, those sorts of questions?
Sure, Mr. Chairman, Councilman Gates, just recently, the council approved two development agreements one development agreement for GPLET for a small 30-unit project called Cooper Place, which is north of City Hall on 2nd Avenue. Other than that, there are 12 existing GPLET agreements, by and large, larger than 30 units for sure, and about the same size or larger than the one we're talking about here today.
So there's how many multifamily?
Multifamily projects, I have to confirm. I would estimate in the last 10 years, 3 or 4. 3.
Okay. Yeah, if we could get information on those, kind of laying those out as we move forward, that would be very helpful. I know in the one that we're dealing with later, there was an effort to obtain new market tax credits. Was that effort made on this property?
Mr. Chairman, Councilman Gates, no, not as far as I know. I defer to Mr. Cornelius to confirm. Nope, that's correct.
Okay. I don't know if that would be, I'd be interested in knowing why. I mean, is...
New market tax credits are only for commercial use.
Okay.
They're not available for residential.
Okay. I guess I'll ask that question again then when we get to the next one. Just help me understand the differences between this project and the other one that we're going to be dealing with.
Sure. If I could just very quickly, the project we're going to talk about has a little more of a mix of uses, has a little more street level retail and restaurant, full service restaurant actually, and this one is almost purely residential.
Thank you. And where are the GPLITs available in the city of Phoenix, kind of for the edification of our viewers?
So the valuable aspect of the GPLET is the tax abatement in the first 8 years, and that is only available within projects that are within the downtown redevelopment area and the central business district. So it's essentially 7th to 7th, McDowell down to the railroad tracks.
What's the dollar amount, the size from a dollar perspective of the Central Station project?
The capital investment, approximately $82 million.
Okay. And so this property is not owned by the city currently?
That's correct. That's
okay.
right.
Are there other GPLITs that we've done that have not been owned by the city?
Yes, there are.
Which ones?
So Alta Phoenix, which is now Skyline Lofts, is not a city project, was not city project, a city-owned property at the beginning. More recently, Roosevelt Point that opened up, that's up at Roosevelt and 3rd Street, once again, privately owned property. Those are the two most recent.
Okay, so this will be the third one. Okay, great. Thank you. I appreciate that information. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilwoman Williams?
Thank you. You know, I believe very dearly that GPLETs have to be used very sparingly and really have rewards for the city of Phoenix. And I've questioned a lot projects that you've brought before us. I understand on this project that it's a small project. It's got the historical perspective. And I'm going to support it because I think there are many advantages to the city of Phoenix. And besides just the dollar amount, I see this as helping the small projects and not always just the large ones, because that's what we want downtown to be. We want the reuse. We want the small. We want the family type situations. And I think that this is a project that is worthy of a designation. So I would move approval.
Thank you, Councilwoman. I too am supportive of this project. I think we don't have enough housing in downtown, and that is for certain. I think density of having more people living downtown, density is critical for the long-term sustainability and potential downturns. I think every time I meet with people here downtown, I get the question. I know I'm not the only one who gets the question, when are we going to get a grocery store down here? And it becomes the chicken and the egg conversation, right? And here's an opportunity to actually bring people in downtown. People want to live downtown. As we continue to talk about light rail plans and expanding south and west from downtown, it's critical. And Councilwoman Williams, I absolutely agree. These projects, this particular project offers financing that's typically that we typically see for the larger projects, and it's kind of nice to see that in this case you have a smaller project, maybe small business, maybe our entrepreneurs. We're opening something up here so that they too will have access to these types of tools, because I too am working very closely with our entrepreneurs, and I think that's what's going to help this city move forward quicker than anything. And so I too am supportive. The return to the city that was mentioned, you just mentioned 7 million. See, there's a difference between a cost and an investment, and this is certainly an investment. And for that reason, I am supportive of this project. I'm very comfortable with it moving forward today. I believe you've already put a motion on the table. So if there's no further discussion, is there a second?
Second.
Further discussion?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you talk to me about the size of this? Obviously, Central Station is a significant project. The majority of the GIPLET projects are very large in size. Can you talk about why this isn't larger? If we want to get people here, let's get more people down here. I mean, that's what I don't think anyone's saying. We just need a little bit more. We want a lot more people down here. So can you speak to that issue?
Sure, absolutely, Mr. Chairman, Councilman Gates. The challenge, I think, as one of our speakers mentioned earlier, is that there's not a lot of large land areas to be able to do large projects anymore. There's a few places where you have a full block, maybe two, but by and large, the lots that are available downtown, the development sites, are relatively small. So you end up with several smaller developments, and I think collectively that adds a little bit to the urban fabric and the interesting feel that folks are looking for downtown as well. Just from a size standpoint, from a residential development, there are three. That's correct. Thanks to my team for providing great info here. There are three projects that are active GPLET right now, and they're about the same size. So Post Roosevelt Square is about 400 units, Roosevelt Point 325 units, and the same with Skyline Lofts, which was originally known as Alta Phoenix. So they're all roughly the same size as this one. There's another project that was approved long ago that's now back on the tax rolls, and that's Camden, and that was 320 units as well. And then the one additional is Cooper Place. So 3 projects currently.
And I understand the lot size. Why not taller, though? We could go taller with this project.
Sure.
Why? Why not? I mean, Summit is tall. It's right next door.
There's a level of economics where that kind of construction starts to make sense, but when you need to start to build elevators and have fire exiting and build with steel construction and glass, that gets a little more expensive than what we see in a lot of other places. That's either stick construction or wood frame construction, or mid-rise steel construction, which is still less than high-rise. So really, it's just a question of economics, and at some point, that high-rise makes sense. But in this market, we're not quite there. The GPLET that we're talking about would help bridge the gap to be able to make this project feasible. But to get up to high-rise and that viability, we'd need to be at rents quite a bit higher than where we are now.
Mr. Chairman, Councilman Gates, I'd also, I think the context on this site has 2 one-story historic structures, and so the site development is trying to respond and be in appropriate context to the historic buildings we're trying to preserve. That does not mean you can't have vertical construction near historic or single-story development, but I do think it's a context for the warehouse district as a whole that it probably is not going to lend itself notwithstanding the summit, broadly to 10, 12, 16 stories, much less 34. It's probably is most likely to be in the 4, 6, 8 stories. And for someone who's pioneering for the first market rate residential project in quite a while in this location, I think we would tell you we professionally think it's the right first step. Does this mean that we only ever do it at this scale? No, I don't think so, but I think you need to start, and someone has to prove the market, and ultimately the best arbiter of where the things can go vertical or not is really the capital markets, and what will they agree to sustain. And I think Scott nailed the issue. It's the per square foot rents that folks are able to sustain. There is a greater belief at the core of the city to be able to sustain the higher rents that either occurred at Cityscape or occurred at Central Station. It's really a rent level that they can rationalize to the capital markets.
Well, thank you, as usual, Scott. Great work, great answers to my questions, and I think you've satisfied the concerns that I have about this project, so I will be supporting it as well.
Can I add one thing?
Right.
And I think there was at one point a potential to close the street and add some additional units, and the community felt that walkability was very important. We're trying to improve connectivity between the warehouse district and downtown, and so they were responsive to citizens and I think staff as well, preference for keeping streets open and improving that walkability and connectivity. So we were part of the reason it looks like it does today.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
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 Aye, motion carries unanimously. Thank you. All right. Item 8, Union at Roosevelt Development Agreement.
Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee, this is another project that is a mixture of residential and commercial, and is at a very much a different scale, but it is, I would tell you professionally from staff, this represents a model for development that's very appropriate for downtown and around transit stations, and we are really hopeful of encouraging just this kind of development going forward. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Scott Sumners and Chris Mackey.
Chairman, thank you for having us here today to talk to you about another very exciting residential project, which has been a long time in the making on a site that is incredibly challenging adjacent to light rail. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Scott Sumners for a full presentation.
Great, thank you very much. This proposal was submitted earlier this year, in September actually, and the developer, the proposer, is Metro West Development, and Metro West is represented by Matt Seaman, who is here today. Thank you. All right, great. We had, as usual, an evaluation panel take a look at the proposal and make recommendations. We had city staff on the panel, but we had an equal number of community members as well from the neighborhood, and their recommendation unanimously was to move it forward. Metro West is a small, local, very engaged developer in the community with a proven track record that's done several small infill projects similar to what this one is. Most significantly probably up at 2nd Avenue in Roosevelt, just a block down the way from this site. And then in addition, Metro West is also developing or improving some historic properties that the city's Neighborhood Services Department owned that we came to this group on last year, in improving the properties for sale as single-family residences. This is, once again, as Paul mentioned, a very complicated site. It used to have a street right through the middle of it, a bunch of utilities in that street. Those have since been moved, and the street was closed to form a site that's a little under an acre. And the developer incurred some significant costs in assembling the site and bringing APS electrical infrastructure to the site, and actually for more than just the site, for several properties around the area. The developer did pursue new markets tax credits in this case in both calendar years 13 and 14, and was shortlisted but didn't quite make the award stage, and so that's why he's before us here today with a request to do a government property lease excise tax. So this project, as proposed, is on a 1 acre site. It is 80 residential units from level 2 to level 5. But down at street level, there's retail on the order of 3,000 square feet, and there's a restaurant that's about 5,000 square feet. And the developer's building this out as a full-service restaurant, which is no small investment to make, but will be a great amenity if approved here, along light rail with a restaurant fronting onto the light rail that's running in First Avenue. There's structured parking, both at grade and below grade. Bicycle amenities actually included in the proposal. The developer did get a bike score and a walk score, and both scores are very high, and this is an important aspect for the community to make sure the site's very walkable. Probably most uniquely, this project, unlike any one that this group has considered before, this one is shovel ready. So we have full development plans that are at planning and development. The council actually approved a site plan, a final site plan for this last July. So developer was waiting for the new markets tax credits. That didn't happen, so he's before us today, ready to go, and very anxious to get started on this great project. From a business term standpoint, once again, developer will finance and construct the entire project. From a time frame, this is a very conservative time frame. I'd expect that he would want to get started and finished much sooner than what's on the screen here and what's in the terms. He's requesting a 25-year G-plat lease, including 8 years of abatement. And then, of course, we have the standard other terms and conditions that are included. This is a small project on an infill site, and it's transit-oriented development, and I think I've heard this referred to as the poster project for infill, for transit-oriented development, and for dense urban development. If approved, this project would bring an additional 100 residents to the downtown area. It would create construction jobs and permanent jobs both, and that number for permanent jobs is 40. It's a little higher than normal, and that's because there's a lot of commercial at the street level, and the restaurant will employ more people. It's consistent with the City Council approved downtown strategic plan, and it represents a $17 million private capital investment in the Roosevelt neighborhood. And really the other part is it helps eliminate a vacant lot, which is a very important concern for the neighborhood groups that we meet with, and would put a dense urban development on that site. We actually presented this group to the Roosevelt neighborhood earlier this week, and happy to receive a letter of support that I'll hand around for this one. From a cost standpoint, or from what the city gets and what the city gives in return standpoint, I'm looking at the 25-year term, totaling up what the one-time city tax revenues from construction are, the annual city tax revenues for rent and utilities, and then the rent that we get on the site. That total is approximately $2.8 million. The value of the G-plat in this case is just under $3 million. So the value of the G-plat is just a little bit more than what the city gets in direct return. But I think the intangible that we didn't quantify here is what's the value of having additional residents downtown, what's the value of having this vacant lot activated, and those are very, very important, very valuable things to the neighborhood. So with that, I am happy to answer any questions.
Okay, we have a few cards. I'll go to the cards first. In favor, Mr. Dave Kreider, DPI.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee. I'm Dave Kreider with Downtown Phoenix, Inc. I'm a Central Phoenix resident, and I estimate that I have driven by or been on the train going by this site 500 times in the last year. And it is such a prominent gateway site into downtown, and I think we have a developer that has developed the right concept for this site. It's mixed use, it brings residents to the neighborhood, et cetera. The other thing I would like to say is I wish we had 100 Matt Siemens working in downtown Phoenix. The developer is an individual that lives in the community, that has been actively engaged with the neighborhood and community organizations, someone that has the kind of credibility in the community where he does garner a lot of support. And I do drive by another project that he has under construction right now, 10 townhomes on 3rd Avenue, and I think he's doing a wonderful job there as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kreider. Marked in favor and available to speak if requested, David Roderick, Downtown Phoenix Partnership. Matt Seaman. And Brian Cassidy. Oh, Matt Seaman, Mr. Seaman, would you like to speak? Okay.
Thank you. My name is Matt Seaman. I'm a partner with Metro West, and we are a smaller developer. We've been very engaged in the Roosevelt South neighborhood. We currently do have projects under construction right now, but this was a unique project. We, if you recall, we conducted a significant amount of infrastructure relocation last year with the street, with the infrastructure, and it's a challenging site. We're bound by light rail OCS lines. We have 69 and 12 kilovolt APS lines on the north side. We have historic buildings that are no taller than 2 levels to the west of us. We're incorporating APS requirements and electricity requirements, not for just our building, but also for their buildings. So these infill sites that are smaller are becoming more challenging, and as you heard from the presentation, our request to you today really comes after a significant effort was made seeking other financing structures. So what we've proposed, I think, satisfies the school district, the neighborhood. We're eager to get going. We do have permits, and the structure is really representative of balancing what we believe is a loan that could get us going here in short term. Thank you,
sir.
Can I ask a quick question?
Of course.
We really appreciate, or I'm very excited about the restaurant space and the local retail, but I understand that that made the financing more complicated and was an additional hurdle. Could you speak to that? Because I think that's something that would be instructive for us to understand.
Yeah, the downtown code and the vision for the neighborhood is really to incorporate ground floor uses that are not just specific to the residents, which is retail, potential sales tax, restaurants for the neighborhood. The challenge with that, and you know, it really didn't become you know, evident until we sought our valuation opinions and our appraisals with our lenders in our appraisal, was the retail and ground floor retail is really looked differently by the secondary capital markets on mixed-use projects, specifically, you know, in downtown, a little bit different. So we're not getting credit for a lot of that space until the third year of our project, which, if you figure that out on our pro forma, it causes a significant impact to the numbers because we're putting those costs into that ground floor space, which we believe is the right thing to do, and hopefully over time we'll be able to prove those lenders wrong and have viable space on the ground floor. But we do have 2 restaurants on the ground floor. They all are full service restaurants, which is ventilation, additional utility requirements with APS, and it did require us to alter the structure of our an original design.
Wonderful. Well, I think you're making the right decision, but that makes us, at least me personally, feel even better about this vote we're taking today, that you were responsive to what the downtown community asked for at great additional expense, and that the capital markets do not share all of our values. But
Not yet. They will.
thank you for
Yeah,
proving.
yeah.
Look forward to your success, and hopefully we can
Thank
change
you.
their minds. So thank you.
Thank you. Marked in favor, Brian Cassidy, available to speak. Okay, thank you, sir. All right, I'll open it up to my colleagues. Councilwoman Gallego.
I just really think this is a good example where we looked for alternative methods and are doing a project that is more expensive in part because of public policy in the area. So I think this is a good example of why this tool is valuable. So I will be very supportive. I'm very excited about the final design, and having the final design is exciting. It's been a concern of mine in the past about exactly what projects will look like once they're done, and now we know what it is, and we know that this really does respond to our urban code and to the downtown community's needs. Thank you to staff for having members of the downtown community on the selection process. When we have something that impacts neighborhoods like this, it's very valuable to have the downtown community involved from the go. So I think this is a good project, responds to what a lot of the community has been saying about needing to get more smaller developers to be able to take advantage of this. So very, very happy to support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Any other, Councilman Gates?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I look at this project. This one's even smaller than the last one, but it's a great project, and it's transit-oriented development. A project like this could probably fit extremely well in every single city council district in this city. I'm getting choked up about this. So I have, it's very emotional, very emotional. There are two places I think of that would be perfect for a project like this, of this size in my district, along 32nd Street at our Park and Ride transit-oriented development, and Sunny Slope at the Sunny Slope Transit Center. Now, when we're looking at projects like this, I really ask the question, why, if we're going to do this, why should this tool, and I know I'm opening a can of worms here, I know that by saying this, but why shouldn't this type of tool be available? When we're talking about skyscrapers, it's one thing. When we're talking about, again, this is a great project, I'm going to be supporting it. But why shouldn't this be available in literally very limited, transit-oriented development, for example, in other districts in the city?
Mr. Chairman, Councilman Gates, staff is 1,000% in agreement with your position.
Paul's getting emotional.
Good thing government affairs is here.
Yes.
I know,
But unfortunately, the limitations in state law which I'm aware of why you're asking the question.
Right.
The limitations that law
Maybe some newly elected officials are watching today at the
could be
state level.
Has deemed this to be the limits where we can use it as was described earlier in downtown, in the central business district. Hey, we believe absolutely that in Phoenix, as the big central city, we have portions of our community that need to be redeveloped in every single district. It's why we came to you in January and said we believe in redevelopment, because if we don't, there's going to be super large challenges for Phoenix going forward. So we are very supportive of the notion of finding ways to appropriately support quality development in every part of our city, because there is not a district that does not have some corner where this is at issue. So it is something that is actually having ongoing conversations amongst the economic development community writ large. In some ways, it's been a conversation that's been going on my whole professional career in Arizona. But be that as it may, the limitations of the law are why this a limitation. I would tell you, and we're going to come find you in a short period of time to talk about redevelopment and sites. We actually think this scale and quality development is something that should be produced, that we should go affirmatively attract other portions of our community, and not only just at light rail locations, but this is a quality kind of project that we think would be great for reuse of sites that have seen their day as commercial, and maybe it's time to start pursuing residential. And so we think there are some good opportunities to explore this scale and type of development elsewhere in Phoenix. At the moment, this is the one we have in front of us, but I commit to you that we remain interested and willing to go pursue this. Everywhere there's a market possibility, we will push just as hard there and continue to come back to the council as there are opportunities to bring economic development and redevelopment tools forward. We'll come get your advice and counsel as those opportunities present themselves.
Thank you. Councilwoman.
You said 100 parking places, 80 units, plus a 5,000 square foot restaurant area. What's the seating capacity for the restaurant? It just doesn't seem like enough parking. It makes me very, and I don't know if you can count on everyone that lives there to eat there or use the train. So
I think the numbers in the parking are 103 spaces in the parking garage, and then an additional 6 on the street. There's 80 units, so they're parked at about 1.1 or so per unit. But I think the spirit or the intent of the retail and restaurant spaces, a lot of that is transit oriented. There is a portion of the garage that's accessible, that is dedicated for that use, for the restaurant and retail use. But I'm not sure about the capacity in the restaurant.
if we have another restaurant that's been there for some time that's not been successful, why do you think that this development is going to be?
I defer to the developer on this one. The comment I would make is we are moving the needle in terms of moving more people into downtown, and the more critical mass we have, the more those kinds of restaurants, those kinds of retail amenities, and possibly a grocery store will be viable in downtown.
Thank you.
Mr. Reed Butler, I know you want to speak. If you can just
Just a
fill
very
out.
quick comment. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay,
Reed Butler,
Mr.
42
Butler.
West Mariposa. Responding to Mr. Gates, Councilman Gates' comment. There are lots of us in industry, and especially in the multifamily housing industry, that would love to have broader use of these kind of techniques. Billy Shields mentions we don't have a lot of techniques, Councilman Gates. So, tax increment financing. All of us in this room who are involved in infill development would love to have that tool. We're one of 2 states that don't have that tool. But that would make a big difference in places like Sunny Slope.
Thank you. Okay. We have a motion.
Move approval?
Okay.
Second.
Motion and a second. Further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Okay. On to item 9.
Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee, we're here today to give you a brief presentation on our parking management services. A contract is expiring in June, and John and his team will describe for you the terms and conditions for the issuance of the RFP and ask for your recommendation to the full City Council.
Thank you, Paul. Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee. Today, the item before us, staff is requesting authorization to issue an RFP for the management of the convention center managed parking garages. This includes 5 parking structures, 3 of which are enterprise funded, which are part of the convention center facilities, in addition to 2 general fund garages, the Heritage Garage and the Regency Garage. This encompasses about 4,400 spaces. We're starting this process now because the current contract expires at the end of the fiscal year. And so with that, Kathy is going to talk a little bit about the process and the evaluation criteria in which we'll go through this process.
Thanks, John. Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee. So our process, we're here before you today, and with your concurrence, we'll be going to council later on this month. We would like to issue the RFP. By the end of November, we're going to do extensive outreach, including industry publications, the International Parking Institute, as well as parkingtoday.com on their websites to get good outreach for this. We have a panel selected that will evaluate proposals, including folks from the convention center, aviation folks involved in parking, as well as a couple of downtown stakeholders who are involved with our parking and our parking facilities, and their patrons use our facilities. And then we'll be back before June, we hope, to the subcommittee and council to make a recommendation to you for award. Thank you, John. Our evaluation criteria you can see up there. We've assigned the most points, or we're proposing the most points for qualifications and experience. We think it's really important that the proposers are used to a downtown area, the variety and types of patrons that we have, very mixed use, from symphony attendees to folks coming down here for Comic-Con. We also think they need to understand parking systems. They're becoming more and more automated, and that's important criteria. So that's our first. Second, we're proposing 300 points for their management plan. That's basically how will they operate the garages. We're looking for efficiency, both efficiency for parking patrons and efficiency for us to save the city money and be most cost effective, which leads us to 150 points for the cost proposal. It is a management fee and reimbursable structure. So there are fixed components and variable components to the structure of the contract, and that is the structure of the contract that we've used for at least the last 10 years. Financial strength is equally as important. They are taking cash and credit cards, revenue that belongs to the city. So financial strength of the company, stability of the company is very important. And then should the panel feel that an interview is required, they have in the past, in my experience, they'll be asking the panel questions, clarifications on the proposal, et cetera, with a brief presentation. Total up to 1,350 points available. A couple of other facts for you. We have talked to the Street Transportation Department about their Park Phoenix program. We will continue to engage them. We're a little different in that the nature of our parkers, but we are extensively looking at online sales, so people could purchase in advance before they come downtown, know exactly which garage they're going to, and have already paid for that parking. So using those kind of technology tools, I think we can all gain a lot for our parkers. There will be a second provision, subject to your approval, in the RFP looking at future parking inventory management strategies. What we're trying to look at is there's a variety of parking downtown. We want to see what's out there in terms of
integrating them, managing them. It could be everything from an app on your smartphone, eBay of parking, if you will, perhaps. It is a separate strategy. Proposers could bid on operating the garages, this program, or both. So it could be either way. And of course, anything that came from that would integrate with the on-street parking program that the street department manages. With that, we'll take any questions you have on the RFP.
Councilman Gallego?
Really want to thank you for working with me on trying to integrate with streets parking and convention center parking. We've had a lot of dialogue about downtown meter parking and many people talking about needing parking spaces for more than 6 hours. And sometimes that doesn't make sense at a meter where we're trying to really encourage circulation and people getting out and spend their tax dollars and being able to leave. So I think it's important that we work together, even though the convention center traditionally has had parking for people using the convention center. As we grow more dense downtown, I think we're gonna have to coordinate more and more, and many people parking just see it all as the city of Phoenix, and the more we can have common technology solutions, the better, so that people can have a good understanding of how much it costs and where parking is available, and also compare that to taking light rail and other transportation options, so that we really are online and digital if that's the way to go, and that it feels seamless and we're working together. So appreciate your help on that. On a separate note, I've been doing some work with the disability community on a variety of issues, and one of the things that's come up as we've spoken with them is that they feel like that the parking accessibility for the disabled community is quite expensive in downtown, that there's not affordable options. So I don't have anything to propose yet, but as we continue that dialogue, is there flexibility in this RFP should we want to go in that direction and obviously find a financial way to do it? So it's folks saying, you know, it costs $25 to park in every disabled spot I can find.
And then, Mr. Chair,
Dollars,
Councilwoman Gallego, the contractor will not be directly involved in any way in setting the rates. It's ultimately for these public garages, the purview of the city council, and so that is absolutely, it's the council's wish. We can come back and discuss rate structures and at any time if that's of interest.
Appreciate that. It looks like we may select a vendor and extend the RFP many times or extend the contract. And I just don't want to surprise folks, but wanted to make sure we're okay on that. And how many folks are working at the convention center parking garages now?
Mr. Chairman and Councilwoman Gallego, right now the current operator employs 18 full-time staff, and they have about 23 to 30 part-time staff, depending on the season. There are more busy times in our garages than others. So,
great. And could we do worker retention as part of this RFP for 90 days?
Absolutely. It's very traditional with our various outsourced services for a newcomer to come in and be interested in the old employees. So that is something we could absolutely include in the RFP.
Wonderful. So when time comes for a motion, I will include that.
Councilman?
Thank you. Thanks for your work on this. This is important, and I'm very excited about this and the innovation that is available here. You look at the Cityscape Garage, what they've done there with Pango and some of the use of smartphones, etc. But I'm gonna tiptoe into some touchy subjects here. Worker retention makes sense to me in your typical, you know, at the airport, you're going from one operator to another. The innovation could likely lead to less bodies being needed. So I think I respect where Councilwoman Gallego is coming from on this, but my concern is that might tie our hands about the innovation. And then related to that is this whole issue of cost. Cost is 150 points, which is only 11% of the RFP. So it seems like we're not that focused on cost. So I think these issues are kind of interrelated, and I think this is probably the right time to talk through this. Maybe I'm missing something here, but it seems like that's a key issue, and worker retention might limit the ability to enjoy savings.
Councilman, in terms of the number of bodies, in fact, over time through technology, the current park operator, since we've implemented automated parking, there is sometimes when you come to the convention center, there is no attendant there. So you pull your ticket, you prepay before you leave, and where we used to have attendants staffed, it's no longer a staffing issue. So we have reduced over the years the number of people working. In terms of the transition, the retention, I believe it's if there's it's a benefit to if there were a new company to come in, the retention thing is really helps to ensure a smooth transition between one operator to another if that were to be. So if there was some time period that was tied to that, maybe that would facilitate a long-term employee cost issue.
Mr. Chairman, Councilman Gates, what is contained and was approved by the council the last time was a requirement that a new operator would need to interview all of the preceding, if it was not the same vendor's employees. Staff is comfortable with whatever the desire is of the city council. It will not cost. We do not believe in the transition that it will cost us more money because implementing new technologies are going to take longer than where the city has made this choice to apply this in other locations. So we don't believe it will either create a time constraint or a greater expense of operating the garage. But ultimately, we defer to the council about the choices in worker retention. We think it has benefits, but we defer to you and aren't making a professional recommendation one way or the other. But recognizing we have done this before, and we don't think it poses a detriment.
Okay, any further questions? No? Okay, I'm in support. I'm also, I'm glad to hear that. I'm certainly in support of worker retention as well. Can I entertain a motion?
Yes, so I move approval of the plans to issue an RFP for parking management services, including a separate possible proposal with integrated parking, and that the motion include worker retention for a 90-day period.
I can second, correct? I will second.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Are you changing the point system by adding that criteria? And if so, what are the points?
I was not planning to, I think.
Mr. Chairman, Councilman Williams, if the council directed staff to include worker retention, it would simply be a requirement of the contract. It wouldn't weigh in. It's a kind of a binary choice. You do it, you want the contract, you do this step. If you do not wish to do it, then you would not compete for the contract.
Mr. Chair, I'm a little uncomfortable about supporting the motion. If the maker of the motion could change it to the interview process, that they guarantee interviews, not just retention, I could support it.
And it was 90 days of retention, so if they did implement technology, then it wouldn't be for permanent.
I agree. What we've done in the past at the airport is a 90-day retention. I think it's everyone that I've talked with, from the vendor to the employees, it's helped both parties. And I don't think anyone would be comfortable with forcing anyone to keep an employee permanently. But a 90-day retention, I think, is a fair thing to do to the employee. These are families that are being employed, and we want to do the right thing by every ambassador of Phoenix, whether it's directly, a Phoenix City employee directly, or someone that is working with us indirectly. I think 90 days is fair. If the maker of the motion plans on keeping the motion as is, I will absolutely support it. Yes,
Mr. Chair, I understand the comments about worker retention. And I guess my focus is more long-term, and I feel like the cost the cost percentage is very small. It's only 11%. And it seems to me like that ought to be a higher number. So I guess, I mean, if the maker of the motion would be inclined to, would be supportive of increasing that, say to, like, you know, at least 250 points. You could pull 50 from somewhere, 50 from somewhere else. Get that number up a little bit more. It seems like it's kind of implied in some of the other areas that there's a cost focus, but it's not explicit, whereas this is explicit. So I don't know if the maker would be interested in that.
If that makes sense to staff, that would be fine with me.
Mr. Chair, Councilman, we could reallocate and increase that points for cost proposal to 250 if that's a desire of the subcommittee, and then reallocate the rest of the points accordingly.
Mr. Chair, Councilwoman Gallego, Councilman Gates, we will come back with our suggestion to the subcommittee members before this would come to the full city council, so you would have the benefit of giving us any advice you might have before we would go to the, before the item is physically on the agenda, so you can have the benefit of seeing how we've executed that, if that's acceptable to the subcommittee.
That would be fine? Great, thank you.
Okay.
I'll amend the motion to include 250 points to make cost a higher priority.
All right, so staff has that.
Correct.
We still have the motion and a second on the table. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
Okay, motion carries 3-1. Moving on to item 10.
Mr. Chair, members of the subcommittee, we're here today to talk to you about, in addition to the suite of services that we provide to the business community to help support international economic development, and in this case, to help our local businesses export to other markets, outside of the United States. And with us today is Economic Development Director Christine Mackey and Assistant Director Hank Marshall to talk you through the details of that.
Chairman, thanks for having us again this morning. We're excited about this new opportunity that we're bringing forward to City Council for their consideration in relation to helping our existing companies grow within the export markets. As you know from previous conversations, foreign direct investments is one of our key targeted industries, and those foreign investments can come in part in the form of investments made by others around the globe into our existing Phoenix companies. So with that for presentation, I'll turn it over to Hank Marshall.
Good morning, Chairman Valenzuela and members of the subcommittee. I'll attempt to be very brief in my presentation to allow time for the other matters that you have to cover today. Essentially, we have agreed to doubling exports in the time frame that you see in front of you. Essentially, double exports to Mexico by 2020 and get to a global doubling of exports by 2025. The strategy that we're trying to deploy involves increasing the number of exporters that we have within our city. Roughly 4% of all companies export, and that's up from 1%. We also want to expand exporters in their market reach. Right now, 40% of all exporters export to a single market. There are 196 markets, countries in the world, and just under half of them export to a single destination. The other thing that we're trying to focus on is the assisting element of this continuum. When you're dealing with exporters, you try to early stage inform, then you move them up to educate, and then ultimately you assist them to get into that. And we're trying to focus on the assist because there's a variety of other resources in the community and in the world that can address the other two, and we find our value proposition is in the assist element. Quickly on this slide, I want to point out to you that the Export Tech Program that we're going to go over here briefly was founded by NIST and the U.S. Department of Commerce in 2007. It was piloted for 2 years and went live in 2009. Last year, we had all-time record exports in the United States, $2.3 trillion. That's up just short of $1 trillion since 2009. Exports employed just shy of 12 million people. That is up just shy of 2 million since 2009. Export Tech has contributed to that because it went live in 2009. You can see that it's being performed presently in 29 states in the U.S. They've currently addressed almost 600 companies with 100 programs. Every company that comes out of this, you can see by that final number, experiences just shy of $1 million lift in their business by coming out of this program. As you can take a look, the bottom element of that slide shows that it's a 3-session process. It lasts 9 weeks. The cohort in each program is something between 4 to 6 companies. The Arizona Commerce Authority in 2013 became an official host of this program. They were designated by NIST under their newly formed acronym in the Arizona Commerce Authority by the name of REV-AZ. Once they were approved as the host, we began working with them to try and secure an opportunity to work directly with them to bring this program to the city of Phoenix. What we're recommending is that we serve as a co-sponsor with the ACA to conduct 2 of these programs in the coming year. Each of those programs I indicated will last for 9 weeks and bring 6 companies through that continuum. In doing that, the ACA will dedicate a resource for the city of Phoenix to help us recruit those companies that are at the appropriate stage in their export continuum to be included in this process. I'd like to point out that there are other cities in the United States that are doing this monthly. Cleveland, St. Louis is doing this monthly, extremely effectively. That is the goal, is to get to the point where we have enough companies feeding into this and pushing them out as successful exporters within our community. With that, we'd like to request your approval to enter into an agreement with the Arizona Commerce Authority to effectively make this a reality and embark on conducting these export tech programs here, dedicated to the city of Phoenix.
Great, great tie.
Yeah.
Love it.
That's the socks.
And the socks. The camera can't see the socks. But he's always a great dresser anyway. So I'll open it up. So we don't have any cards on this particular item, so I'll open it up to my colleagues. Councilman Williams?
One, where's the money coming from?
Beg your pardon? As far as I know, it's coming from the downtown.
Mr. Chairman, Councilman Williams, it's coming from the Community Reinvestment Fund. So we're going to pilot this as an idea. And if it looks like we get good success, then we may come back to the council as part of the normal budget process. But this is coming as a one-time expense from one-time money that is contained within our existing budget.
And 2, how do you plan to advertise and recruit businesses to go through there? I mean, this seems like it could be very popular, but nobody's going to know about it.
And we're going to use the Arizona Commerce Authority because they've been doing a STEP program under the same way, where they go out and recruit companies to get into the STEP program. And they're able to vet the qualified ones, so we're not picking the winners and losers. So we're going to use the Arizona Commerce Authority to effectively do the outreach.
Are you going to give priority to Phoenix companies?
Only Phoenix companies.
And Chairman Councilwoman Williams, Arizona Commerce Authority has already identified 200 companies within the city of Phoenix to be able to do a direct outreach with this program to ensure good attendance right from the beginning.
Good.
Okay. Councilman Gates?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Great. Obviously, I'm a big supporter of export and have seen personally the impact that it can have on Phoenix-based companies. One question, we're working with the state. That's great. What about working with the federal government as well in partnership with this? Is that a possibility as well?
The federal program that's affiliated with this, Councilman Gates, is known as Global Target, and we're working equally with them to identify how that would complement this, so that we don't have a competing activity, but how it complements this. So the answer to your question is yes.
Super. Thank you.
Okay. Any further discussion? We have a motion?
I move approval.
Okay.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on to item 11, 2015 state and federal legislative agenda, aviation. It's for information and discussion. Thank you.
All right. Mr. Chairman, I'm Tom Remus with the City of Phoenix Office of Government Relations. Joining me today is John Gonzalez, who will be talking about our proposed state agenda, and James Orlowski, who will be talking about our proposed federal agenda. We're coming before you today with a new process to receive input on our state and federal agenda. Our traditional process has been that we would go out to city departments, receive input from the departments of items that they would like to see brought forward both at the state and federal level. We would meet with your offices and then come to you in a package, usually in December or January, to talk about our agendas. This year, we're trying something new, and we want to come to you before subcommittee, so that way you'll have more opportunity to get more questions in and talk about what items we are proposing. After we go through the subcommittee process, we will circle back with each of your offices to talk to you about what happened in subcommittee, what are ideas that perhaps we didn't bring forward but are of interest to you, and then we will package those together and come to you at the December 9th policy meeting. Our state and federal agenda always have some guiding principles, and those stay the same year to year. With our federal agenda, we always want to make sure the city's priorities are to promote fiscal sustainability and protect local authority. And with the state agenda, we always want to protect our shared revenues, oppose any unfunded mandates, and preserve local authority. Something new that we've done also this year as we get into our state agenda is we heard in the past that when we brought forward ideas, we didn't have language that you could see and touch and feel that talks about what we would propose to change in state law. So what we're doing this year is we're bringing language that has been drafted by city staff and our attorneys that if we were given direction to move forward, we would work with a bill sponsor and ledge counsel to get that incorporated into state law. We thought that was important for you to see actually what we are proposing in legislative language. So with that, let me turn it to John Gonzalez, who will talk about the one item that we're proposing to bring forward for aviation issues on our state legislative agenda.
Thank you. The one item that was submitted from the Aviation Department on the state agenda would increase penalties for those individuals that trespass at critical public facilities. Currently, state law has defined what that is. The airport qualifies. You have water treatment facilities, oil tank farms, and things of that nature. And currently, a violation of that is one of the penalties is a Class 6 felony. With the fact that the TSA, the Federal Transportation Security Administration, and is constantly giving information to airports around the country to try to augment and beef up their security efforts. As part of that, conversations have taken place between the legal team at Phoenix Sky Harbor and the Maricopa County Attorney's Office on the penalties that are currently in state law. And as a result, it seems that there is an initial agreement from the County Attorney's Office that they can see merit in increasing the penalty to a Class 4 felony instead of a Class 6 felony. So that is a proposal that we're requesting of council eventually, but that is a proposal of taking that current statute and taking it from a Class 6 felony to a Class 4 felony. And the difference in the penalty, while there's different circumstances and how the judge could administer it, currently a Class 6 felony could have a minimum sentence of 6 months to a maximum sentence of 1 year in prison, while Class 4 felony is a minimum of 1.5 years to a maximum of 3 years. So that would be the difference of taking it to that level. And that's it.
Great, and I'm James Orlowski with Government Relations, and I'm going to walk us through the federal portion of our legislative agenda. As Tom referenced, each year we work with the city departments. We ask them what their federal priorities are, what requests they have at the federal level, and that becomes the substance of the federal agenda that we then take to the mayor and council and get your input for the coming year. This year, today, we have 4 requests in the area of aviation that I'll walk us through. The first is supporting the Federal Aviation Administration reauthorization. The current FAA reauthorization actually became law in 2012, and it expires in September of 2015. So it's coming up here pretty quickly in the next year. Obviously, the FAA is of critical importance to the airport. They oversee all matters of the nation's aviation system. That includes safety, environmental, construction, planning, and on down the line. Without FAA reauthorization, the city's 3 airports wouldn't have access to their basic means of funding, and so obviously that's a concern when you talk about some of the funding needs at the airport. Of course, FAA reauthorization is going to be a large piece of complex legislation, So I just want to highlight some of the issues that are of the utmost importance to the city, and then there are additional details in your packet as well. And I just want to also note that a lot of these goals are similar. They're going to look familiar to you. They have been in past federal agendas, and with the coming of the reauthorization legislation, they're coming back up to the surface. So one, of course, is supporting increasing the passenger facility charge. You may recall that that has been a fixed $4.50 since the year 2000, and so looking for an increase there. Also supporting streamlining the AIP entitlement application process. Additionally, supporting increased funding for the contract tower program. And you may recall that there were issues in previous years with the Goodyear Airport, which has a contract tower, and so looking for additional funding there. And then also supporting adding the OEI, or one engine and operative regulation, to Part 77 of the federal aviation regulations. And that's just a sampling of some of the issues that are of the utmost importance to the city as we start talking about FAA reauthorization and working with some of those stakeholders. And staff recommends support of an FAA reauthorization bill that reflects the city's priorities. That's number one. Second priority on our list is opposing unfunded federal mandates. And two that we wanted to particularly bring to your attention are the TSA exit lane staffing and also biometric exit system implementation costs. And of course, when you talk about unfunded mandates, both at the state and federal level, when those are imposed on local cities, of course, the local jurisdiction, in this case the airport, would have to make up that funding in some way. So just to highlight those two issues, excuse me. TSA exit lane staffing. TSA has indicated to the airport community that it expects airports to assume that responsibility in the distant future. That's something new that airports have never assumed, so that would be a new requirement that they would be taking on. And the cost of that, in staff looking at the issue, they've pegged a cost of approximately $1.2 million if at Sky Harbor they were required to staff all 7 of those exit lanes, so there's a pretty substantial cost there. The second issue that we wanted to bring your attention to is the biometric system exit. And this is a system that's required by Congress to track biometric data of non-citizens who are departing the country. It's a change from the current process wherein passengers in current times are screened as they enter the country, and so that would also be a difference from how it's currently operated. And in those issues where there are potential unfunded mandates, staff recommends support for opposing those unfunded mandates. The third issue that we have for you is supporting increased staffing for CBP and TSA, particularly to decrease wait time for travelers. And of course, with Sky Harbor being one of the 10 busiest airports in the nation, adequate staffing, of course, is critical, especially when you take into consideration that the city is really making valiant efforts to try and increase the number of international flights at the airport. Talking about that, CBP staffing is really critical in just making sure that those international passengers are processed quickly and efficiently.
And for the committee's clarification, CBP is Customs and Border Protection.
And so staff recommends supporting increased staffing for both CBP and TSA at Sky Harbor. The final fourth item that we have for your consideration is supporting 2015 AIP, which is Airport Improvement Project grant requests. And the city has a list of 5 grant requests, capital projects that would be beneficial at the airports, which we would recommend that the city recommend applying for. The last thing that we have for your consideration are our federal performance measures. And so you may recall that in the past, it's been a high priority for the mayor and the council that we kind of put some performance measures, some milestones to our federal agenda. It can be somewhat difficult to kind of quantify the benefit that we're getting there. And so we definitely want to add some performance measures to, at the end of the contract term, we can look back and see kind of how we moved the ball and advanced our federal agenda. And so milestones are a critical component of the federal program, and those are included in your packet. And like I said, we'll come back to you at the end of the year to report on how we've advanced those milestones, and we would recommend your support and welcome your input on those as well.
So, Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee, that's our brief presentation. We're available for any questions, input, changes, and questions.
Councilman Gallego.
Thank you. Thank you for your hard work on this issue and for working hard on behalf of our largest economic engine. As we talk about local control, one issue of particular importance to me is land use around the airport, and I would love to see us add to our agenda that that the FAA trusts the city's judgment on land use around the airport. I have learned recently that we may know more than they do about things like noise impacts. And I would love to see us have as much flexibility as we move forward with getting some of those vacant lots that we've acquired off the airport back into production. So that is an area where I think that the FAA might be responsive to our interest in supporting the neighborhoods as well, and there be possibilities there. And then I had the pleasure of meeting with the FAA about one engine operable, and they informed me while we were there that they recommended we pass state legislation to prevent development around the airport. And I do not think that is realistic, but I think we might continue our dialogue on some of the challenges that that rule poses for our airport, in addition to adding it to Part 77 and having more of a dialogue with development, but also having a dialogue with the FAA.
Thank you.
Further discussion? Councilman Gates?
Thank you. Nothing like putting you on the spot, but we had a little election yesterday, and wondering how you all think the election, obviously Senate changing hands, and obviously that's going to lead to new chair people. Any immediate thoughts on that, on the impact that might have on FAA in general and Sky Harbor in particular?
Mr. Chairman, Councilman Gates, at this time, no. We're still working with our federal partners to look at what the new makeups might be on committees, on priorities, and those efforts. But those are something that we're following very closely. We'll make sure that as we learn more, we share it with your offices, and we will include it as part of the overall federal agenda package that we bring to you on December 9th. I think after Election Day, we continue to move forward with our agenda, both at the state and federal level. There might be different folks around the table, but we do our best to make sure they're informed of our priorities here at the City of Phoenix.
Thank you.
Yes, Councilman.
Tom, is there a reason you just are sticking with aviation? Because this committee covers a lot more, and I was thinking about a couple discussions we've already had this morning on expanding the GPLIT process, looking for tax incentives through the state legislature. Could you respond to that, please?
Mr. Chairman, Councilwoman Williams, we did break up our state and federal agenda into 4 areas to fit into 4 subcommittees. So we will be going to the T&I subcommittee, the neighborhood subcommittee, and the public safety subcommittee. Sometimes these issues overlap with committees. We are open to input on GPLED or other economic issues to hear from you today that we can incorporate into our larger agenda. We just didn't have city departments bring forward those topics as something that we needed to look at addressing. But if the council has that as a priority, or if you have interest for items for us to look into, we're happy to look into that and bring them back to you.
I think it would be great if you could do that. I think we need to look for new opportunities to assist businesses grow. We haven't reached financial stabilization as a city, and I think we need alternatives and incentives to attract new business and retain business here. So it goes beyond aviation, but I think it does fit with this committee. Thank you.
Thank you.
Speaking of speaking of strategy, as far as I understand, going through some of the issues that we faced with the flight paths, for example, when Congress passed the authorization, they gave the FAA a lot of latitude to make changes to things like flight paths with minimal input from neighborhoods, from the community, and everything we do, everything, I don't think this is unique to Phoenix. I think maybe some may think it is, but I think that we are so community oriented. Everything we do is driven by the public. I've said it a million times. It's not a box that just gets checked. Public input is not a box that gets checked. We should be governing based on public input, and it goes against everything that I stand for when those types of changes can be made in DC without asking a question, without going out into the communities. And so if you can make part of your or just think of a strategy moving forward, how can we somehow, speaking of local control, how can we somehow make public input part of that process? So, I mean, it'd be good for the city of Phoenix, obviously, but I think it'd be good for neighborhoods across the country. But I just think it's the right thing to do, regardless of where people serve, whether they're here in Phoenix, going all the way out to DC. We're here because of the public that we represent. Councilman.
And I'd like to echo those comments as well. This recent change has gotten a lot of attention, obviously, and the FAA is paying attention. But up in my district and in Vice Mayor Waring's district, we've had issues with Scottsdale Air Park for years as they're getting larger and larger planes, and we were just told to deal with it, period. So I'm pleased that now at least FAA is talking to us, but I couldn't agree more. They're not above public input. They shouldn't be. And so I would second, it wasn't a motion, but if it was, I would second it strongly.
How about a high five?
Absolutely. How about it? Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman.
And
Councilwoman?
perhaps we could also amend the federal agenda after we have our discussion in the next item, because I think that they are very related, and we all agree there is an area.
When we
of
have 400 people, right?
Uh-huh.
400 people or more coming out to the council chambers. And it's frustrating because you look into it and you realize that some of these changes are being made in DC and they're not asking a single question. Something's wrong there. So we should be working on that.
So Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee, I believe that the FAA will be coming back to the city with some response to the public meeting that was held last month shortly. I think that we could take that information and what they're providing us and help craft a strategy that we could place into our federal agenda about how to address public input. So we hear what you're saying, and we'll work with you and with our professional staff and DC lobbyists to come up with an approach.
Thank you, Tom. Okay. Do you need a motion? Motion for this? This is
for
for
input.
information.
Thank
Okay.
you.
And I guess in the future, I agree with Councilwoman Williams that there's some other issues related to downtown and others that would be good to be aware of, some of the things that GPEC and the Arizona Association for Economic Development and other groups to which we belong, their work, their agendas as related to the issues of this subcommittee. So would be wonderful in the future.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I do have a couple of cards. Simon Wheaton Smith signed for items 11 and 12. Do you wish to speak, sir?
If I may, speak shortly on it.
Sure, of course. Would you like to just speak on both items now?
They're actually divergent.
Gotcha, okay, okay.
Mr. Chairman and members of the subcommittee, my name is Simon Wheaton Smith. I live in a historic area in Phoenix. I wanted to support, in fact, the staff recommendation on all the items in here, but I did want to make 3 comments, if I might. The first one is on public participation. I retired from many years in the FAA, specifically the Flight Standards Division, where I was certified in 4 major areas. My division and many areas in the FAA are very familiar with the fact that a wise decision always involves 4 groups of people. Those planning the change, those making the change, those with a legal, moral, or ethical responsibility, and finally those affected by the change. Just because the FAA, under a statutory authority, may bypass public input does not mean that is a wise decision. So for that reason, I fully support the recommendation on page 31 of encouraging the FAA to use the public process. The second quick comment I wanted to make was on the element talking about increasing staffing for CBP and TSA. In my last 3 years in the FAA, I was my division's labor organization for security. I was the national point of contact for security. And I fully support the increased staffing for the TSA at Sky Harbor. I work very closely with their enforcement division, and they're very fine people, and they have a tough job to do. My final one is on federal performance measurements, meeting at least once a quarter to discuss, among other things, FAA flight path procedures. Again, I strongly support that. Thank you very much for listening to my comments.
Thank you. Great accent.
Yeah.
I hope you understood it.
Of course. Love the diversity. Okay. And Don Conrad, do not wish to speak. Items 11 and 12. Okay. Thank you, sir. And Mark, in favor or opposed? In favor of asking the FAA to listen. Yes, sir. Okay, I just repeated it for those who are watching from home. Okay, all right. Moving on to the final item. Federal Aviation Administration FAA changes in aircraft departure procedures. This is for information only. So,
Good morning, Mr. Chair, subcommittee members. Still slightly morning. Acting Aviation Director Tammy Fisher here with Assistant Aviation Director Chad Makowski to provide an update to the subcommittee on the new flight procedures for departures at Phoenix that we've just mentioned. These flight procedures were implemented at Sky Harbor by the Federal Aviation Administration just this past September. These new procedures have resulted in tremendous noise concerns coming from area residents, particularly in neighborhoods surrounding downtown Phoenix. Shortly after the new procedures went into effect, the Aviation Department's Noise Information Office began logging noise complaints and transmitting those complaints to the FAA. In October, aviation staff facilitated a community meeting with the FAA. The FAA's regional administrator was there to provide residents with information about the new flight procedures and also to hear and record their concerns. I want to publicly acknowledge and thank both Congressman Ed Pastor and now Congressman-elect Ruben Gallego for attending the community meeting, along with our Mayor Greg Stanton, Councilwoman Kate Gallego, Councilwoman Laura Pastor, and Councilman Michael Nowakowski. I also want to extend my compliments and express my appreciation to the many community leaders. As you mentioned, Mr. Chair, we think about 400 people for being so well prepared, incredibly organized, and completely respectful during this very important public dialogue with the FAA. At the end of the meeting, the FAA committed to do further analysis and report back to us within 30 days. As you know, the Federal Aviation Administration controls the nation's airspace. They determine flight paths and they manage air transportation safety. These new procedures are a component of FAA's Next Gen program, which is an initiative that's designed to modernize the nation's airspace to provide safer and more efficient and more environmentally friendly flight operations. The new flight procedures being implemented throughout the country use satellite technology for navigation rather than land-based navigational equipment. These new procedures are referred to as area navigation, or RNAV, and I would ask your permission to use that term RNAV throughout the presentation, if that's okay. It is important to know that some aircraft, a very small percentage of aircraft, are not equipped for satellite-based navigation and will use traditional navigation procedures. These are typically non-commercial, small, private aircraft. This new type of navigation results in very precise and narrow flight tracks as opposed to the broader flight paths that result from traditional navigation procedures. And the new navigational procedures also reduce fuel consumption and emissions while improving safety. RNAV procedures for arriving flights were implemented in 2006 following an environmental assessment process in accordance with the National Environmental Protection Act, or NEPA. As was mentioned earlier, in 2012, Congress enacted the FAA Modernization and Reform Act, which streamlined the environmental review process and gave discretion to the FAA administrator to limit the amount of environmental review and public process. In 2013, the FAA completed an initial environmental review in accordance with this new act and determined that implementation of these new procedures did not require any further environmental review. The new procedures for departures at Phoenix were implemented on September 18th. The areas of the greatest change, which you'll see graphically in a moment, are really west of the downtown area and along the Grand Avenue corridor. And now I'd like to ask Assistant Aviation Director Ted Makovsky to show you a graphic representation of the old and new procedures and comment on the process moving forward.
Thank you, Tammy. Mr. Chair, members of the subcommittee, Sky Harbor Airport, as one of the nation's busiest airports, has well over 500 commercial airline departures departing out of the airport every single day. Aircraft generally need to fly into the wind, and prevailing winds dictate which direction they depart out of the airport. Departures to the east of the airport over towards Tempe and Mesa are considered east flow, and departures to the west over and around the downtown area are considered to be on west flow. This map, which was developed by the Aviation Department for illustration purposes, represents 14 days of traditional departure flight tracks prior to the September 18th change. The second map, and I apologize if it's a little light there and difficult to interpret, represents 14 days of Phoenix RNAV departures that occurred after September 18th. Looking at these maps independent of one another makes it really quite difficult, quite frankly, to compare and contrast the legacy and new departure routes. However, when you overlay them, you can start to see the differences of the departure tracks previous to the change and those after. The vast majority of the new flight tracks are contained within the contours of legacy flight tracks. However, to the west of Sky Harbor, you can see some significant changes. In particular, if I could draw your attention over the downtown Phoenix core where you see the word Phoenix, you will see that a new departure corridor, which represents four of the 9 RNAV departures to the west, go over the Grand Avenue departure corridor to the northwest. The FAA is ultimately running this west flow with the 4 of the 9 in the Grand Avenue corridor. The remaining ones go straight west and to the south and southwest. Aircraft are now turning to this new corridor approximately 3 miles to the west of the airport, where historically they made their turn to the north about 10 miles to the west of the airport near 67th Avenue and the I-10. While the FAA has indicated in their analysis did not suggest that route changes would be significant, it's now clear that the changes resulted in a significant impact to and a response from the community. In just under a month and a half since the implementation of the new routes, the Airport Noise Information Office registered 721 calls from 380 households. The overwhelming majority of the historic neighborhoods to the north of the downtown core, and predominantly the 85007 zip code, resoundingly responded to this change. But there were impacts also to other areas of the community. We did receive calls from the Levine area in the southwest of the valley, as well as Scottsdale and Mesa. 3 significant themes relayed to the noise office were ultimately that the residents were not notified of the change. Historic homes are being affected after significant effort has been placed in restoring and revitalizing these communities and neighborhoods, and that residents are experiencing repetitive noise events throughout the night, disrupting their quality of life. A little bit about our Noise Information Office. The Aviation Department does maintain a Noise Information Office to provide support and information to citizens who have questions about noise related to aircraft operations in the vicinity of each of our 3 airports. Information is available at skyharbor.com, where citizens may fill out a web form, or they may call our noise office directly at 602-683-2669. Our Noise Information Officer strives to make contact with every citizen as expeditiously as possible. All of those calls are logged, all data is logged, and it's ultimately shared with the FAA for further analysis. Summary reports are also produced, and they're available on skyharbor.com. In fact, we have the last 10 years of noise information summary reports available on our website. So to serve as a recap, the FAA conducted a streamlined environmental review as required under current public law in 2013 and activated the RNAV departure routes on September 18th of 2014. Upon recognizing the impact these routes had on the community, the Aviation Department quickly engaged the FAA to respond to the community concerns. The department was able to obtain a special FAA email address and phone number so impacted citizens could relay their concerns directly to the FAA in addition to the Aviation Department. On on October 16th, the department facilitated an FAA public outreach meeting, as Ms. Fisher indicated, at City Council chambers. The FAA Western Pacific Regional Administrator, Glenn Martin, participated in this outreach meeting. We estimated nearly 450 citizens were in attendance at that meeting. Approximately 30 members of the public spoke, and we have received and logged and forwarded over 350 written comments to the FAA. The meeting was live streamed on Phoenix Channel 11, and a video of this meeting is available at phoenixskyharbor.com's YouTube website. At the conclusion of the meeting, Mr. Martin indicated the FAA was very much appreciated the comments by the public. He's ultimately indicated that taking the comments and flight data into account, the FAA is conducting additional analysis and expects to provide information to the Aviation Department within 30 days. We expect to get that contact from the FAA on or around November 14th of this year. So if I might close, I would say that we in the Aviation Department understand the important role that we play in providing services to our community. Mr. Chair, members of the subcommittee, you have our commitment that we will continue to work closely with the FAA and the impacted community to advocate for reasonable solutions to address concerns that have been relayed to us. And we'd be happy to answer your questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Chad. Okay, I have 12 cards here, and I'll just read them off, and if you wish to speak, you can do that, or you can just let us know if you are in favor of the discussion. We do appreciate all the work that staff has done. Simon Wheaton-Smith.
If I may speak shortly. My name is the same as it was a few minutes ago, Simon Wheaton-Smith. I live in a historic area. I've lived in a lot of historic areas in Phoenix, and I love the place. I did speak at the September meeting, October meeting, and what I wanted to reiterate, it was 2 or 3 things. The Phoenix Noise Office, I have to give them very high credit and high marks for their responsiveness, and yes, they do call back. Thank you very much for that. Our core group have come up with suggestions to the FAA, which I think will allow several things to happen, one of which is the FAA can win by modifying some of the departure paths, specifically to the northwest. By the way, not only was I in the FAA prior to that, I also flew as a pilot the 737, so I'm very familiar with the departures out of here and out of other airports. All I can say is I strongly support engaging the FAA. It does go back to the previous agenda item. Public input is very important, and I appreciate what this subcommittee has done here, and please keep supporting us. I would also add that the airlines will still gain with our recommendations from prior to the changes, because we're not saying you have to do something drastic as reducing the fuel efficiency by going back to them, but somewhere in between is going to work for everyone. So I support that, and thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you, sir. Councilman Gates has been very supportive, obviously, and has to leave, but obviously has been very supportive on this subcommittee, and he's expressed that. Ginger Maddox.
Mr. Chairman and subcommittee members, my name is Ginger Maddox. I live in 85007. I have for 29 years. And even though my house is built like a little bunker, unless I open my windows, I really don't have as much effect from the noise as my neighbors do. But that has not kept me from trying to assist. When we realized that the change was permanent, there was a core group of volunteers who decided that they would try to help the neighborhood understand. I became the researcher. I had never heard of the word NextGen until a few days after the 18th. I took it upon myself to read the document that was written in regard to the summary for 2014, and I come to realize that it is a very, very large project that is basically like a 3D puzzle. And when one component doesn't fit well, then it throws off all of the other components. So NextGen is here to stay. United States is not the first country to put in this modernization system. As a fact, we're a little late to the party. But when the Congress took a look at the progress that was being made, one of the reasons that they determined that they needed to help them and assist them in reaching their goals on time and on budget is they inoculated them from the impact study process as well as the public hearing process. But in doing so, they appointed what was called the Next Gen Advisory Committee, which is made up of 28 members from the industry that meet quarterly and advise the FAA on recommendations that the impacts are creating within the industry. And part of that NAC committee meeting is also public input. So the Congress recognized that if they gave the FAA the go-ahead to implement this, that there were going to be some issues, as any large project has. And so part of the process of working through those issues is public meetings and public awareness from affected communities. So that is exactly what our meeting was in October, was to get input from our community as how this is affecting us. Unfortunately, because there was no advanced knowledge of the community, we have had to take it upon ourselves to educate our neighbors. And like any other political process, people assume things that aren't necessarily true. So we've tried to be as knowledgeable as we can to get people to understand that there are things going on behind the scenes, that we want to be in partnership with the FAA, and that we believe that there are resolutions to solve this issue. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, ma'am. Steve Dreisison.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee, my name is Steve Dreisison. I'm a 40-year resident, as I said before, of the FQ Story Historic District. I thank you for taking this item up in your agenda. I want to thank Aviation, Tammy, and Chad for all of your effort here to facilitate the meeting. I want to thank Michelle Dodds and HP for assisting us in our process. I want to underscore a couple of things. The historic districts are obviously very important to all of us. These neighborhoods have become stable. They have helped support the downtown redevelopment. We are a collective economic engine in the central core. But the historic districts are not the only neighborhoods affected. There are neighborhoods throughout the valley that are affected. You've gotten a few complaints from some that have borne the noise for some period of time. We feel for them. There are also disadvantaged neighborhoods in the flight path that are not historic districts but are some of the oldest parts of our community. So we have to remember that there are a range of residents, not one or two neighborhoods, not a handful of residents. We're talking about hundreds and thousands of people that are impacted here, so that's very important. We appreciate the FAA listening now. The cart came before the horse. We need to improve that process. We are the boots on the ground, as the term is said, and we could have, as Councilwoman Gallego has said, we know better what's going on in these neighborhoods and in these areas than someone in D.C. looking at a land use map and what's supposed to be a commercial corridor on Grand Avenue. So this is the start of the process, and we're looking forward to continuing the process of the dialogue with the FAA. And I thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Gigi George.
Thank you, Chairman Valenzuela, members of the committee. I'd like to lend a little bit of historical perspective to this, something that we're going to take up next year and something that has happened many years ago. One of the main tenets of the Phoenix General Plan to be adopted next year is create an even more vibrant downtown. That's one of the 5 things. Our central city neighborhoods are the very nucleus of that goal and very supportive of that goal. Phoenix never developed the rings of despair around downtown, where other close-in neighborhoods in other cities did. We escaped that fate in the 1960s and the 1970s. When so many central cities were deteriorating, we organized a neighborhood association, the Encanto Citizens Association, which at this point, I'm a founder and I'm again the president after several years. So we can't allow that to happen now. Homeowners, this is very close to my heart because I've lived in the same house for 45 years. Homeowners need the security that their investment will not be in vain. I live exactly 2 miles from City Hall, so basically it's my second home too. And according to Michelle Dodds in Historic Preservation, Phoenix has invested $15 million to support historic preservation, residential and commercial, of course. So we citizens, we know we can't do it alone. And Chairman Valenzuela, we greatly appreciate your holding that meeting last week and appreciate your listening to us now, and certainly appreciate your support. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Last but not least, Donna Rayner. Okay. All right. This is for information only. Any comments from my colleagues? Okay.
Thank you for sitting through this very long meeting, and very sorry that you have to go through this. And particularly wanted to thank Steve for your comments that this is a citywide, or at least that it hits many areas in the city. Could we go back to the picture that shows the two different? So I have the pleasure of representing some of the areas to the southwest, and we've certainly had some dialogue, although not as much. Partially, I think, just to the nature of the communities that are there. Could you describe the southwest path, the new one?
Councilman Geigo, yes. So there are three primary corridors that go to the west of the airport when we're on West Flow. One goes to the northwest along the Grand Avenue corridor. There is a straight out departure, as you can see, which goes primarily along Buckeye and Lower Buckeye. Those are primarily departures to the west coast, Los Angeles, and that area. And then we have a southwest departure corridor, which handles all flights going to the southeast, to the south, to Mexico, and then to the southwest to the San Diego region. So if I were to characterize the departures on West Flow, I would say 4 out of the 10, 4 out of the 9 RNAV departure routes go to along the Grand Avenue corridor. I believe 2 of them go along the western LA corridor, and I believe the remaining go down to the southwest, which would be over the Levine community.
And we've certainly got complaints from Grant Park in addition to Levine, so throughout that area, perhaps not as well organized, and there are some language barriers. I think most of the press coverage explaining what's happening has been in English.
Councilwoman Geigo, that is absolutely correct. We have received complaints from those communities, from the Levine community. I happen to be a resident of the Levine community and certainly have followed the dialogue on Facebook and Nextdoor and various social media sites about the interest that the citizens have had in these departure corridors as well.
Mm-hmm. So appreciate that very much, and I hope we can find a solution that works for everyone as opposed to moving it just to concentrate in one area. So appreciate
Councilwoman, if I may, I'd say that is exactly why the FAA is taking time and being very deliberate in how they modify or propose modifications to these routes, because they want to make sure that they're not changing impact from one community to another.
Mm-hmm.
And so they have to be very thoughtful about that process, and so that's what they're doing right now.
And this is certainly a process that has shaped our city very much, and I think later today we'll have an opportunity to vote on $750,000 to maintain vacant lots that used to be homes, among others. So it has definitely changed our land use and something that has real impacts. This is a serious issue from an economic development perspective in addition. Could you talk about the departure paths for cargo? Is it following the same?
So that is a great question, Councilman Gaggo. I have received some questions about that. Cargo departure RNAV procedures are exactly the same as airline commercial RNAV procedures. The reason why cargo RNAV departures are probably more prevalent in the community is a lot of the cargo activity does happen during the nighttime hours. And so people are hearing the planes, and when they call in to find out what plane it was, they're being told it's perhaps one of our cargo carriers, and it's because it's of the time of night that they fly out of the airport.
And is that something that changes seasonally?
The RNAV departures, to my knowledge, this is a brand new departure corridor that the FAA has instituted. I do not believe that the routes change seasonally. However, activity does change seasonally. As we're approaching the holiday season, we are seeing a significant increase in cargo operations over other times of the year.
And where does that typically go?
So the primary 2 cargo operators at Sky Harbor are UPS and FedEx, and Memphis and is it Louisville? Louisville.
I'm sorry, it's a very unfair question. You're doing very, very well, but
yeah,
you know your aviation.
Hubs. So, and both of those are to the east-southeast. They may take it. We have seen, for example, and it all depends on arrival flows and whatnot, where the FAA has routed certain flights on different RNAV departure routes than you would typically expect because of just deconflicting other traffic and what have you. So I would imagine the majority of those are going over the Southwest Valley. However, we would have to do a more detailed analysis to understand exactly what's happening there.
Okay, so this is not a problem where the current flights may be even more pronounced, or the patterns, complaints may have
That's
during
correct,
the holiday, okay. But we're watching that and trying to make
Absolutely.
sure. Well, thank you, appreciate our hard work, and wish the FAA had followed our lead.
Thank you.
Okay, I do want to thank all the members of our community for coming out. I want to thank our aviation staff and my colleagues. I want to thank my team, the District 5 team. Shortly after the October 16th meeting, I had a chance to meet here at City Hall on the 11th floor with aviation staff and some of the stakeholders in the community, and we talked. And as promised, and I know I'm not the only one on the council who's doing things like this, but this letter is going to the Honorable Michael Huerta, at FAA Administrator. It's going to be CC'd to every member of our federal delegation, and like my colleagues, we are going to continue to move forward. And as I mentioned, I'll say it one more time, public input is not a box that simply gets checked. We should be governing based on public input, and that's from the very local levels of government all the way up through to DC. So thank you once again. You're being heard, and we're all in this together. So I know this is just for information only. So yes, ma'am. We will. Kelly will get you a copy of the letter as well. So the next, as I mentioned before, we always have a call to the public at the beginning and the end. We don't have any cards for the end. Everyone has a list of future agenda items. Any additions? Hearing none, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.